Sarah Rivera, a talented high school student, dreams of transforming air quality in her polluted neighborhood. But when her teacher, Miss Greene, uses every trick in the book to undermine her project, Sarah's path to success becomes a battle against deep-seated prejudice. As she fights back, Sarah's innovation starts drawing attention far beyond the school's walls, triggering consequences no one could have predicted. Will Sarah's determination be enough to overcome the odds and bring about real change, or will the forces of discrimination be too powerful to defeat? Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more exciting content, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now let's dive in. Sarah Rivera had always been a curious soul. Even as a child, she would take apart old radios just to see what made them buzz and hum. Growing up in a bustling yet neglected neighborhood, she noticed the thick, smoggy air that lingered like an unwelcome guest. It was more than just a nuisance. It was a silent danger affecting children, the elderly, and everyone in between. By the time she reached high school, Sarah was determined to create a solution, an air filtration system that could make breathing safer and healthier in her community. Sarah's project proposal was ambitious. It wasn't just another science fair entry. It was her way of addressing the very air her family and neighbors breathed. She meticulously researched and designed a prototype that could be placed on rooftops, drawing in polluted air, filtering it, and releasing cleaner air. It was scalable, cost-effective, and above all, meant for the very people who needed it the most. Excited to share her idea, Sarah approached her science teacher, Miss Greene, who had been teaching at the school for years. Miss Greene was known for being strict, but there was something else in her gaze whenever Sarah spoke, an unspoken skepticism that seemed reserved for certain students, particularly those who didn't fit her preconceived notions of what a promising scientist should look like. When Sarah presented her idea, she was met with an arched eyebrow and a thin smile. "Sarah, this project is quite the endeavor," Miss Greene remarked slowly, her tone laden with skepticism. "But are you sure you want to attempt something this complex? It might be a bit out of your reach." The remark stung, but Sarah tried to respond calmly. "I've done a lot of research, Miss Greene. I'm confident it can work. It's a project that could really help people in our community." But Miss Greene's expression didn't change. "Maybe you should consider something simpler, like growing plants or testing water samples. These kinds of projects are more suited for someone like you." Sarah's heart sank. It wasn't the first time she'd heard this kind of dismissal, but it felt more personal this time. "Someone like me," she repeated silently to herself as she walked out of the classroom. Miss Greene's words echoed in her mind throughout the day. It wasn't just the critique of her project that hurt. It was the underlying assumption that she wasn't capable because of who she was. Later that afternoon, Sarah found solace in talking to Eva, her best friend since elementary school. Eva, a fellow Latina with a fiery spirit, always had Sarah's back. As they sat in the school's outdoor courtyard, Eva listened intently while Sarah recounted the conversation with Miss Greene. "Don't let her get under your skin," Eva said with a determined look. "You're more than capable of making this project work. She's just trying to keep you from standing out." Sarah nodded, grateful for Eva's unwavering support. "I know, but it's frustrating. I want to prove her wrong, not just for me, but for everyone she's ever doubted." That evening, Sarah returned home to her bustling household. Her grandmother, whom she fondly called Abuela, was preparing dinner. Abuela was the cornerstone of the family, a strong, resilient woman who had immigrated years ago with dreams of a better life for her children and grandchildren. Sarah sat down at the kitchen table, feeling a mixture of frustration and determination. "¿Qué te pasa, mija?" Abuela asked, her voice warm but laced with concern. Sarah explained the situation, trying to hold back tears. "It's just not fair, Abuela. I know I can do this, but she doesn't believe in me." Abuela placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "People will always doubt you, especially when you try to change things. But remember, mija, the only person who can truly stop you is yourself." Sarah took her grandmother's words to heart. She decided that no matter how many obstacles were placed in her way, she wouldn't let them define her limits. She spent the next few days revising her project proposal, refining her ideas and preparing for the school science fair. The science lab became her second home. Sarah spent late nights in front of computer screens, scribbling notes and experimenting with materials. The exhaustion was real, but so was her drive. The filtration system started to take shape. An assembly of fans, filters, and a solar-powered motor that could operate independently. It was a design that was innovative and feasible. As the deadline for the science fair approached, Sarah submitted her revised proposal to Miss Greene, hoping for at least a fair review this time. But when she returned to class the next day, Miss Greene's reaction was cold and dismissive. "Sarah, I've gone through your proposal again," Miss Greene announced in front of the class. "I still think it's overly ambitious. I don't think it's suitable for the school fair." The public rejection was humiliating. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with a mix of anger and shame. As she glanced around the room, she noticed a few classmates looking sympathetic. But others seemed indifferent, as if they expected this outcome. Sarah's resolve wavered for a moment, but only briefly. She knew that giving up now would mean accepting defeat, not just for herself, but for all those who had ever been underestimated. That afternoon, she took a bold step. She decided to appeal the decision to the school administration, a move that was rarely taken by students. The next day, Sarah stood in front of a panel of administrators, presenting her case. Her voice was steady, and her words were driven by a genuine desire to make a difference. She explained the potential impact of her project, emphasizing how it could benefit the community and why it deserved to be part of the science fair. After a tense deliberation, the administration decided to allow Sarah's project back into the competition. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental to Sarah. As she left the office that day, she spotted Miss Greene watching her from down the hallway. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sarah could see the disapproval in Miss Greene's gaze. But Sarah felt no fear this time, only a sense of justice and newfound strength. The appeal had been won, but the real battle had just begun. With her project officially back in the running for the school science fair, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was aware that her victory was merely a step forward, not the end of her struggle. She had to prove her project's worth not just to Ms. Greene, but to the entire school. In the following days, Sarah worked tirelessly on her air filtration prototype. The school lab became her second home as she carefully adjusted the fan speeds, refined the filter layers, and ensured the solar-powered motor worked seamlessly. Every evening, as the hallways emptied and the lights dimmed, Sarah remained bent over her workstation, her eyes weary but filled with determination. Despite her focus, Sarah was not completely alone in her efforts. Eva often joined her, offering moral support and helping where she could. "I might not be a science whiz, but I can definitely hand you the right tools," Eva joked one evening, trying to lighten the mood. Her presence was a much-needed source of encouragement. But Ms. Greene wasn't finished making Sarah's path as difficult as possible. During class, Ms. Greene would frequently bring up Sarah's project as an example of what she called overreaching. It wasn't unusual for Ms. Greene to make veiled remarks like, "Some students think they can tackle things that even experts struggle with. Ambition is good, but there's a fine line between confidence and delusion." Sarah knew these comments were directed at her, and although they stung, they also fueled her determination. Her classmates noticed Ms. Greene's bias too. Some were angered by it, while others seemed indifferent, perhaps too accustomed to this sort of treatment to be surprised by it. Sarah's family remained her strongest pillar of support. At home, her parents made sure she had everything she needed: tools, materials, and, most importantly, encouragement. Her father, a mechanic by trade, often helped her with the mechanical components of the device, giving tips on how to ensure the fan's alignment or improve the motor's efficiency. One particularly challenging evening, Sarah faced a major setback. The solar-powered motor she had carefully calibrated suddenly malfunctioned. It was a critical part of her design, and without it, the entire system couldn't function. Frustrated, she spent hours trying to fix it, but nothing seemed to work. Eva, sensing Sarah's frustration, tried to console her. "It's okay to have setbacks, you know. This just means you're pushing boundaries." Sarah shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "I know, but every setback feels like proof that Miss Greene was right. What if I can't make this work? Eva's eyes flashed with determination. Sarah, you've already come this far. Don't let her words define what you're capable of. You've already won by not giving up. That night, Sarah's grandmother found her still working at the kitchen table, hunched over blueprints and scattered notes. Abuela quietly placed a cup of warm tea in front of her, then sat down beside her. Remember, mija, Abuela said gently, the toughest battles often come right before the biggest victories. The motor may be broken, but your spirit isn't. Inspired by her grandmother's words, Sarah redoubled her efforts. Over the next few days, she studied every aspect of the motor's design, identifying where things went wrong. She found a solution, an alternative circuit setup that was not only more reliable but also more efficient. It was a breakthrough that brought her project closer to completion. However, just as Sarah felt she was making progress, Miss Greene dealt another blow. The day before the school science fair, Miss Greene called Sarah to her desk. Sarah, I've reviewed the final project list, she said with an expression of false sympathy. I'm afraid your project still doesn't meet the criteria. I suggest you consider other avenues. Sarah's heart sank, but her anger quickly replaced her disappointment. You can't just disqualify me without a valid reason, she protested. I've met all the requirements set by the administration. Ms. Greene's expression remained unchanged. I'm only trying to protect you from the embarrassment of failing publicly. It's not personal, Sarah. It's reality. Feeling a mix of anger and determination, Sarah stormed out of the classroom. Eva found her pacing in the hallway, her face flushed with frustration. What happened? Eva asked, concern evident in her voice. Sarah explained Miss Greene's latest attempt to sabotage her project. I can't believe she's still trying to stop me, she said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. Eva nodded thoughtfully. Well, if she thinks this is the end, she clearly doesn't know you well enough. With renewed determination, Sarah decided to go above Miss Greene's head once again. She approached the school's science fair committee directly, presenting her complete project along with documented proof of her progress. She also showed evidence of the criteria she had met and even exceeded. The committee, aware of Miss Greene's bias from previous complaints, agreed to let Sarah present her project as planned. On the morning of the science fair, Sarah arrived early, setting up her booth with Eva's help. The filtration system stood prominently at the center, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as she looked at the result of her hard work. The judges arrived, each showing genuine interest in her project. Sarah explained the filtration system's design, demonstrating how it could capture and filter harmful particles from the air while running entirely on solar power. The judges were impressed, not only by the technical aspects, but also by Sarah's clear passion for the project. As she spoke, a crowd gathered around her booth, intrigued by the possibility of improving air quality through such a simple, innovative design. But just as Sarah thought everything was going well, she noticed Miss Greene watching from a distance, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Sarah felt a pang of doubt. Would Miss Greene find another way to undermine her? Would she try to sway the judges against her? Sarah pushed the thoughts aside. She knew she had done everything possible to make her project a success. And regardless of the outcome, she had already proven to herself and to many others that her ideas were worth fighting for. As the day ended, the judges approached Sarah with smiles on their faces. Congratulations, Sarah, one of them said warmly. Your project is not only impressive, but also practical. We believe it has the potential to make a real difference. Sarah's heart swelled with pride, but she kept her composure. Thank you, she said, her voice steady. This project means a lot to me and to the community I hope to help. The applause that followed was deafening, and for the first time, Sarah felt the full weight of her victory. It wasn't just about the science fair. It was about defying the odds, breaking down barriers, and proving that ambition couldn't be confined by prejudice. Miss Greene, meanwhile, remained silent, her face flushed as she watched Sarah accept the recognition. But there was no satisfaction in seeing her teacher's discomfort. Sarah's victory wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and a chance to prove what was possible when determination triumphed over doubt. Despite the success of the science fair, Sarah knew that the road ahead was still uncertain. While the judge's approval marked a significant achievement, it didn't mean the end of her struggles. If anything, it was just the beginning. The recognition was encouraging, but the challenges Sarah faced were far from over. Ms. Greene's influence within the school was strong, and Sarah was fully aware that her teacher's opposition might not end with the science fair. Word of Sarah's project spread quickly through the school. Some students admired her courage and determination, seeing her as a symbol of what could be achieved despite bias and adversity. A few even approached her in the hallways, offering words of encouragement. "You're an inspiration," said Jamal, a classmate who had also felt marginalized by certain teachers. "You've shown that it's possible to push back against unfairness." But not everyone was supportive. A few students, influenced by Miss Greene's opinions or simply skeptical of Sarah's abilities, spread rumors. "She probably got special treatment because she made a big deal about it," one student said dismissively. "It's not like her project is actually that groundbreaking." These comments stung, but Sarah chose to focus on the positive feedback. She knew that her project was more than just a science fair entry. It was a meaningful attempt to improve the air quality in her neighborhood. The idea had already garnered interest from a local environmental organization, which invited Sarah to present her design to a wider audience. As Sarah prepared for the presentation, Miss Greene continued her efforts to undermine her success. During class, Mr. Greene would make sarcastic comments about ambition without expertise and projects that are more fantasy than reality. It was clear that Miss Greene's disapproval wasn't just about Sarah's project. It was about Sarah herself. And while Sarah tried to ignore these comments, they often weighed heavily on her mind. One day during a lab session, Ms. Greene called Sarah to her desk. "I see you're still working on that filtration system," she said, her tone condescending. "I hope you're not getting your hopes too high about its impact. You know, it takes more than just a clever idea to change the world." Sarah met Miss Greene's gaze, refusing to back down. "I understand that, Miss Greene, but I also believe that big changes start with small steps." Miss Greene's lips thinned into a forced smile. "Let's hope your steps don't lead you to disappointment." The confrontation left Sarah feeling frustrated but also more determined than ever. She realized that Miss Greene's attitude wasn't just a challenge to her project, but a challenge to her resilience. It wasn't just about proving her teacher wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above the negativity and keep moving forward. The day of the environmental presentation arrived, and Sarah felt a mix of nerves and excitement. It was her first opportunity to showcase her project to professionals outside the school, and she knew that the stakes were higher. She arrived early, setting up her prototype in the conference room of a local community center. The event was attended by environmentalists, community activists, and even a few local media representatives who were interested in her story. As Sarah began her presentation, she felt a surge of confidence. She explained the design in detail, demonstrating how the filtration system could reduce particulate matter and improve air quality in urban areas. Her passion was evident, and the audience responded positively, with several attendees asking insightful questions and expressing interest in collaborating with her. By the end of the presentation, Sarah was approached by several members of the local environmental organization. "This is impressive work, Sarah," said Dr. Collins, one of the lead researchers. "We'd like to explore ways to support your project and possibly implement it in areas with high pollution rates." Sarah's heart soared. This was the validation she had been hoping for, a chance to see her work make a real impact. She returned to school the next day, eager to share the news with Eva and the few classmates who had supported her from the beginning. However, when Ms. Greene heard about Sarah's success, her reaction was anything but congratulatory. During the next science class, she made another attempt to belittle Sarah's achievement, addressing the whole class in a thinly veiled critique. "It's easy to impress people who don't understand the technical details," Ms. Greene remarked. "But true innovation requires a deeper knowledge of science and engineering, which takes years to develop." Sarah felt her anger rising, but she remained silent. She knew that responding directly would only give Ms. Greene more reason to criticize her. Instead, Sarah decided to channel her frustration into further improving her project. If Miss Greene's doubt was the fuel, then Sarah's determination was the fire. The situation took a surprising turn when several of Sarah's classmates, inspired by her resilience, began speaking out against Miss Greene's behavior. A group of students decided to file a formal complaint with the school administration, citing not only Miss Greene's treatment of Sarah, but also her consistent bias towards certain groups of students. The administration took the complaint seriously, initiating an investigation into Miss Greene's conduct. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to work on refining her filtration system, exploring ways to enhance its efficiency and durability. She received guidance from Dr. Collins and other experts who provided feedback and resources that helped her improve the design. As word of Sarah's progress spread beyond the school, she started receiving invitations to other events, including local community meetings where she was asked to speak about environmental issues and the importance of youth-led initiatives. She even received a letter of interest from a nearby university, which was impressed by her work and offered to provide further support in the form of mentorship and access to research facilities. While Sarah's success continued to grow, Miss Greene's situation became increasingly precarious. The investigation into her conduct revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior that extended beyond Sarah. Several students came forward with similar experiences, detailing how Miss Greene had dismissed their ideas or discouraged them from pursuing challenging projects. In response to the growing evidence, the school administration decided to place Miss Greene on leave, pending further review. The news spread quickly, becoming a topic of conversation among students and staff alike. Some were shocked, while others saw it as long overdue. For Sarah, the outcome was bittersweet. While she felt a sense of justice, she also recognized that Ms. Greene's behavior was part of a broader problem, one that extended beyond a single teacher or classroom. Sarah hoped that her experience would encourage others to speak out against prejudice, no matter how deeply rooted it seemed. As the school year progressed, Sarah's reputation as a determined and talented young innovator grew. She continued to receive support from her community, and her project became a symbol of what could be achieved when courage met opportunity. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she felt stronger than ever, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With Miss Greene placed on leave and the school buzzing with discussions about Sarah's achievements, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. For the first time, students felt empowered to challenge biases openly, inspired by Sarah's tenacity and her victory at the science fair. Sarah, meanwhile, was focused on taking her project to the next level. The support she received from the local environmental organization and the university had given her access to more resources and expert guidance. But with greater opportunity came greater pressure. Sarah spent hours refining her design, exploring ways to increase the filtration system's efficiency and make it even more cost-effective. She had learned to embrace the challenges that came with innovation, no longer seeing setbacks as failures, but as opportunities to improve. One particular evening, as she experimented with a new type of filter material in the school lab, she discovered a way to enhance its absorption capacity without increasing the cost. A breakthrough that made the filtration system more viable for widespread use. Her excitement was palpable, and she couldn't wait to share the news with Eva and Dr. Collins. "This is it," she told Eva over the phone, unable to contain her enthusiasm. "The new design is not only more efficient but also cheaper to produce. This could really work on a larger scale." "That's amazing, Sarah," Eva replied, her voice brimming with pride. "You're making history here, and it's all because you didn't let anyone's doubt stop you." With the improved prototype ready, Sarah was invited to present it at a major environmental conference. It was a chance to showcase her work to industry experts, researchers, and policymakers. The conference was to be held in a large convention center, with hundreds of attendees from all over the region. Sarah knew this was a pivotal moment. If her project was well received, it could attract funding and partnerships needed to implement it on a larger scale. On the day of the conference, Sarah felt a mix of nerves and excitement as she entered the bustling venue. The hall was filled with booths, each showcasing innovative projects aimed at addressing environmental issues. As she set up her booth, she was approached by curious attendees who wanted to learn more about her work. Sarah's nerves began to ease as she engaged with the visitors, explaining the technical aspects of her filtration system and its potential impact. Her scheduled presentation was one of the highlights of the event, drawing a large crowd that included industry leaders, environmental activists, and media representatives. As she stood on the stage, facing a sea of expectant faces, Sarah felt a surge of confidence. She was no longer the uncertain student doubting her abilities. She was now a determined young innovator, ready to make a difference. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "I'm Sarah Rivera, and I'm here to present a solution that could change the way we address urban air pollution. This filtration system isn't just an idea. It's a step toward cleaner air, healthier communities, and a more sustainable future." As Sarah explained the details of her design, she could see nods of approval from the audience. Her passion was evident, and her knowledge of the subject was impressive. When she demonstrated the improved prototype, showing how it could effectively reduce air pollutants in real time, the audience broke into applause. The session ended with a question and answer segment, during which Sarah fielded inquiries from industry professionals. "How scalable is this design?" one researcher asked, clearly intrigued. Sarah answered confidently. "The materials used are both affordable and accessible, making it possible to scale up production without significantly increasing costs. With the right partnerships, we could implement this in multiple cities within a short time frame." After the presentation, several attendees approached Sarah with offers of collaboration. Dr. Collins, who had been watching from the audience, was beaming. "You did it, Sarah," he said warmly. "This is just the beginning. You have the potential to drive real change." Sarah was elated, but as she stood among the supportive crowd, she noticed a familiar face lingering near the edge of the room, Miss Greene. To Sarah's surprise, Miss Greene approached her booth, her expression difficult to read. For a moment they stood in awkward silence, the past tensions hanging between them like an unspoken burden. "I came here today out of curiosity," Greene said finally, her voice softer than Sarah had ever heard it. "I wanted to see for myself what you've accomplished." Sarah wasn't sure how to respond. There was no longer any anger or resentment in her heart, only a sense of clarity about how far she'd come. "I'm glad you did," she replied simply. Miss Greene looked at the prototype, her eyes filled with something that resembled regret. "I underestimated you, Sarah," she admitted, her voice tinged with a hint of remorse. "I was wrong to dismiss your ideas and your abilities." It was an unexpected moment of vulnerability from the teacher who had once been Sarah's harshest critic. Sarah felt a mix of emotions, relief, validation, and a quiet sense of closure. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "But this wasn't just about proving you wrong. It was about making a difference for my community." Miss Greene nodded slowly. "I understand that now. I hope you continue to challenge people's assumptions, including your own." With that, Miss Greene turned and walked away, leaving Sarah with a sense of peace she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't a complete redemption for Miss Greene, but it was a step toward accountability, a small but significant acknowledgement of her mistakes. In the days following the conference, Sarah's project gained significant media attention. Local news outlets featured her story, highlighting her journey from a discouraged student to an emerging innovator. "Young Latina scientist aims to improve air quality with low-cost filtration system," read one headline, capturing the essence of her achievement. The success opened new doors for Sarah. She received offers from environmental organizations, research grants from universities, and even a scholarship from a prestigious institution that wanted to support her continued work. It was more than she had ever dreamed of, and yet it felt like only the beginning of a much larger mission. Back at school, Sarah's success inspired other students to pursue their own ambitious projects. The school administration, recognizing the need for change, implemented new policies to ensure fair treatment of all students, regardless of background. Teachers were encouraged to support creativity and innovation, creating a more inclusive environment. Sarah's classmates, who had once been silent witnesses to Ms. Greene's bias, now spoke openly about their own experiences and sought to support one another. The ripple effect of Sarah's perseverance was evident, and it felt like a genuine shift toward a more just and equal school culture. On a sunny afternoon, as Sarah stood outside the school with Eva, she reflected on the journey she had taken. "I can't believe how much has changed," she said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. Eva smiled. "It changed because you didn't give up, Sarah. You fought for what you believed in, and that made all the difference." Sarah nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment, but she also knew that her journey was far from over. There were still more communities to help, more minds to change, and more battles to fight. The air filtration system was just the first step in a lifelong commitment to making the world a better place. As she looked out at the city skyline, hazy but still filled with hope, Sarah felt ready for whatever came next. She had learned to rise against the odds, and she knew she would continue to do so, no matter the challenges ahead. As Sarah's project continued to gain recognition, she found herself navigating an entirely new world. She received invitations to speak at various events, collaborate with researchers, and even consult on community-driven environmental initiatives. It was a whirlwind of opportunity, and each new achievement reinforced the impact of her work. But despite the success, Sarah never lost sight of where it all started: her school, her community, and her determination to overcome discrimination. The story of Sarah's perseverance and innovation had resonated beyond the local community. Media outlets were quick to highlight the larger narrative of her triumph over prejudice, with headlines like "Teen Innovator Challenges Bias and Wins Big." The national spotlight was not only a recognition of Sarah's work, but also a moment of reckoning for those who had tried to hold her back. Within the school, the investigation into Ms. Greene's behavior concluded with serious repercussions. The school board, after reviewing testimonies from Sarah and other students, found that Ms. Greene had displayed a consistent pattern of discriminatory behavior over the years. The administration decided to remove her from the teaching position, citing violations of ethical conduct and a failure to uphold the school's values of inclusivity and equal opportunity. The news spread quickly, sparking mixed reactions among the student body. While some felt sympathy for Ms. Greene, believing that she had simply been old-fashioned in her approach, others, particularly those who had been targets of her bias, felt a deep sense of relief and justice. Sarah, however, had complex feelings about the outcome. While she believed in accountability, she also knew that change required more than just the removal of one person. It required a shift in the culture that allowed such behavior to persist in the first place. "I never wanted to see her lose her job," Sarah admitted to Eva one day as they sat on the school steps watching the sunset. "I just wanted her to see us for who we really are, not through the lens of her biases." Eva nodded thoughtfully. "I get it, Sarah. But sometimes, accountability is the first step toward real change." She needed to face the consequences, not just for you, but for everyone she's mistreated. Sarah knew Eva was right, but the situation still felt bittersweet. In many ways, Miss Greene's departure was a symbolic victory for every student who had felt underestimated or dismissed. But Sarah also hoped that it would lead to more significant changes within the school system itself, changes that would ensure no student ever had to face what she did. Meanwhile, Sarah's success continued to ripple through the community. Local organizations began to collaborate on broader environmental initiatives, inspired by Sarah's filtration system and its potential for widespread application. With the help of Dr. Collins and other experts, Sarah's prototype was being adapted for installation in public areas, such as playgrounds, bus stops, and schools, where air quality was particularly poor. The recognition also brought new challenges. As Sarah balanced her responsibilities as a student and an innovator, she often felt overwhelmed by the weight of expectations. She received countless messages from aspiring young scientists, community leaders, and even policymakers, all eager to discuss the potential of her work. It was exhilarating, but also exhausting. One day, Sarah's mother noticed her looking particularly worn out. "You've been working so hard, Mia," she said gently. "But remember, it's okay to rest. You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders." Sarah sighed, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and fatigue. I know, Mom, it's just there's so much to do. I want to make sure that this project actually makes a difference. Her mother placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. And it already has, Sarah. You've inspired so many people, not just with your work, but with your courage. But you also need to take care of yourself, or you won't be able to keep making a difference. The words struck a chord with Sarah. She realized that in her drive to succeed, she had neglected her own well-being. It was a valuable lesson, one that reminded her that self-care was just as important as fighting for justice. As the school year drew to a close, Sarah prepared for graduation. It was a significant milestone, not just for her, but for her family and community. She had been chosen as the valedictorian, a recognition of both her academic achievements and her role as a leader. As she stood on the stage in her cap and gown, looking out at her classmates and the many familiar faces in the audience, she felt a surge of emotion. Today, I stand here not just as a student, but as someone who believes in the power of resilience, Sarah began, her voice steady yet filled with feeling. I learned that our greatest strength comes from within, and that when we rise above prejudice, we make space for others to rise with us. This journey has taught me that change is possible, but it requires courage, support, and a willingness to fight for what is right. The crowd erupted into applause, and as Sarah looked out at the sea of faces, she saw her family, friends, and even Dr. Collins, all beaming with pride. But there was one face in the crowd that surprised her, Miss Greene. After the ceremony, Mr. Greene approached Sarah, her expression no longer filled with disdain or condescension, but with a sense of humility. Sarah, I know that my words and actions hurt you, she said slowly, her voice tinged with regret. I never intended to cause harm, but I see now that my biases did exactly that. I want you to know that I am truly sorry. Sarah paused, considering Miss Greene's words. There was a sincerity in her voice that Sarah had never heard before. Thank you for saying that. Sarah replied, her voice steady but kind. I hope that this experience has made a difference for both of us. Miss Greene nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and gratitude. It has, Sarah. I've started taking steps to address my biases, and I'm learning to be better. I wish you all the success in the world. You truly deserve it. With that, Miss Greene walked away, leaving Sarah with a sense of closure she hadn't expected. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a step toward healing and accountability, one that felt genuine. As Sarah and Eva left the graduation ceremony, they found themselves walking through the familiar streets of their neighborhood. The air felt cleaner, and the sky, though still tinged with a light haze, seemed brighter than before. Can you believe we made it? Eva asked, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and joy. Sarah smiled, her heart light with the knowledge of all she had accomplished. Yes, we did, she replied. And this is only the beginning. Eva nodded. So what's next? Sarah paused, looking out at the city she had worked so hard to improve. There's still so much to do, she said thoughtfully. But for now, I think I'll take a moment to rest. I've earned it. And as the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the city, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. She had risen above prejudice, overcome obstacles, and made a tangible difference. But more importantly, she had learned that the fight for justice was not just about winning. It was about persistence, compassion, and the unyielding belief that change was possible. Sarah knew that the journey would continue. But for now, she was content. She had faced karma, embraced growth, and proved that resilience could truly shape the world. And as she stood side by side with her best friend, the future felt wide open, filled with the promise of all the good still waiting to be done. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Click on the video now to watch. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.